accident at the junction of Woodfield Road and the Manor Way is still causing long tailbacks.
It's 20 past.
On the traffic situation as we go through the peak period. And don't forget to give us a call if you encounter problems as you're travelling this morning. Moving along to an email received from Audrey Hamilton, who's getting very hot under the collar about the proposed industrial development in the new park.
Don't tell me, Andy, I don't want to hear it. I suppose I'll have to take Ian.
Oh, come on, Liz.
Didn't seem to cramp your style on Saturday.
You know it comes and goes.
Conveniently.
Things are a bit strained in the Bellwood household. Sorry, no pun intended. But Andy's been having some trouble with his back, and this sometimes leads to a bit of friction.
Ian, Chloe! Come on, we'll be late.
Okay.
Liz's frustration is understandable. This problem's been going on for some time, and on the face of it, Andy doesn't seem to be doing much to help himself. Or, of course, her. Perhaps that's not so surprising either. Although the causes of back pain are now better understood, it still costs the country millions of pounds a year in lost working days. The message about how to prevent back injuries just isn't getting through. Andy's a typical example. Andy works for a small electronics firm. His job involves a degree of manual handling, but nothing excessive. Up to 3 months ago, he seemed perfectly fit, looked after himself, played various sports, a bit of DIY. Then, one Tuesday evening...
All Andy's problems didn't occur at that moment when he reached into the car to get his bag. That was simply the culmination of a long period of exposure to unnecessary bending and twisting. 80% of the working population will experience back pain at some time in their lives. 20 to 25% of those will actually go on to recurrence, ending up with chronic symptoms. But it's still a myth to say that the back is a weak structure. In fact, when it's used correctly, it's extremely strong. Looking at this model of an adult spine, we can see a definite S shape. In this balanced position, the spine is at its strongest to resist the loads that are placed upon it during everyday life. Moving away from this towards more of a C shape makes the back much less efficient and more at risk of injury. The spine consists of a series of bones or vertebrae that are balanced one upon the other. In between each bone, there's a disc. The disc has several functions. One of these is to act as a shock absorber. They also help to facilitate movement. The disc is made up of two parts: a soft central core, which is kept in place by a series of tough fibres, a bit like the layers of an onion. The disc is strong when the loads pass through the central core. However, as the back moves into a C shape, the core is pressed against the rings, putting them under strain. Over time, this can cause a small tear. The soft central core pushes through the tear and presses on the next ring. At first, this is painless, as there are no nerves in the centre of the disc. It's not until the damage has progressed that pain is felt. This process can take place over a number of years and culminate with a simple movement like bending or reaching, the last straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. It's also a myth to think that it's only people who do physically demanding tasks who suffer. Statistics show that people who have relatively sedentary jobs, like office workers, also develop back problems.
Like a lot of us, Andy had received some information on manual handling. Unfortunately, also like a lot of us, he didn't see the importance, or maybe just couldn't always apply what he'd learnt. Entek's a subsidiary of a bigger outfit. The pressure was on to increase output, so even when Andy made a suggestion to improve the layout of his work area, his boss had more pressing issues on her mind.
Round here. Would you mind if I took some time to move these tables around?
You're joking, aren't you? I've got head office breathing down my neck to get this order complete, and do you want to start moving the damn factory about? Forget it.
But it's only the tables. It won't take long. It'll save time in the long run.
Sorry, Andy, no way. We'll look at it some other time when we're less busy, all right?
The problem is, they're never less busy. Although neither Andy nor Helen realised it at the time, his suggestion to reorganise the workplace would have reduced the risk of damage to his back and probably made him more efficient.
In any manual handling task, there can be elements of risk. For example, bending risks damaging the disc. Twisting can be a risk. Carrying a load at arm's length, that's more risk. So we have lots of risks which individually may seem insignificant, but when stacked, one upon the other, increase the potential for damage to the back. Over the day, our individual risk stacks cause fatigue and have an impact on our capacity to handle loads. In the real world, it's not always possible to adopt the ideal posture when lifting or moving things. But if we can reduce the stack of risks, for instance by bending the legs, lifting the load a lot closer to the body, or eliminating any unnecessary twist, we can conserve our capacity, building up a buffer zone for when harder manual handling tasks can't be avoided.
Sound advice, based on detailed research into the problems of back pain and other musculoskeletal problems. So why don't we heed it? Well, there can be many reasons that influence our behaviour. Take Andy, for instance. Fit lad, never ailed anything. He probably never thought for a minute that the loads he handled would ever cause a problem. Then, wham! He took a couple of days off sick, much to the annoyance of Helen, of course. He wouldn't go to his GP because he said she'd only suggest rest. Liz was sympathetic at first, but things didn't seem to get much better. Although his back was still a bit stiff, Andy returned to work. Understandable in the circumstances. Wife, couple of kids and a mortgage. He was probably worried about his job. Things were tough in the electronics game. Over the coming months, the degree of pain he suffered varied quite a bit. Some days he'd seem fine. Others were a struggle. He'd need the odd couple of days off, wouldn't be able to play with the kids. Still, he did nothing about it. You can see why the people in his life started to wonder.
I think it's starting to affect Chloe. Yesterday she asked me why her daddy wouldn't pick her up. We've been to Gilbert Park. Shall we sit down?
You've got to sympathise with all parties in this saga. Everyone's under pressure. Liz doesn't understand Andy's problem. Andy doesn't really understand it himself, which causes him grief at home and at work. Helen's got targets to meet, but as a manager, she also has responsibility for the health and safety of her people.
One of the difficulties with this whole issue is people don't perceive there's a problem. We're not fully aware or certain of the consequences of our behaviour. As we've already said, damage to the back builds up over time, and as there are no nerves in the centre of the disc, there's no pain to indicate an immediate problem, so people have what appear to be more pressing issues to deal with. It sometimes takes a more personal or immediate consequence to get them more focused.
Entech don't have their own specialist in this field, but they realised that Helen was having problems, so they pulled in a consultant ergonomist to give her some advice.
Oh, something to do with Andy's job may be contributing to the problems he's having with his back. You need to look at both the tasks people carry out and the workplace itself to identify any risks, then ensure that they're eliminated, or at least minimised. Obviously you've got some ideas on this yourself, but listen to the guys doing the work. I can help you with your assessment and tell you what complies with regulations and good health and safety practice, but you're the experts here, not me. A lot of it comes down to communication. You have to make sure that people know they can come to you with their problems and that you're open to their ideas. Remember I was telling you about Belt? You can use that right now to find out what risks are present and what ideas and solutions there may be to overcome them. Some of them will be dead simple and could be put in place today. Others will take more time to plan, get authorisation for, and so on. But by involving the staff and keeping them aware of what's going on, they don't have false expectations or assume that nothing will change. One word of caution, though. Make sure the solution to one problem doesn't create another.
A useful way of helping identify manual handling risks so we can reduce our own risk stack is to use an approach called BELT. It's easy to apply and can be used by anyone. Although it would help Andy's supervisor, it would also be useful for Andy and his colleagues. No one, not even the most caring boss, can follow their staff around all of the time, encouraging them to reduce their risk stack. That leaves each of us to be our own risk stack basher, which isn't a bad thing because we're the experts in our own jobs. The B represents behaviour and how to use your body to protect your back. It's important to override the urge to just do it quickly or believe it doesn't matter this time. It's also important to keep the muscles and ligaments that protect our back strong by appropriate exercises and stretching. E represents risks from the environment, clearing obstacles, avoiding risks from confined spaces, slippery surfaces, and so on. This also includes climatic conditions like avoiding excessive heat or cold. Keeping your back warm and dry protects it. The L of BELT refers to the load itself. Weight isn't the only factor. If the load is an awkward shape, moves when handled, or is hard to grip, then the risks can stack up. If it's outside your capacity, you need to get help. T refers to the task itself, identifying risks created by the task being carried out at a height that's too high or too low, requiring a load to be handled over long distances, for long periods, or repetitively without a change of position. There'll be some risks that individuals can't do anything about. They'll need referring to management for action. But using BELT has helped many people who do awkward or difficult jobs to take control and reduce their personal risk stack.
Coffee.
Oh, thanks.
It's been really interesting talking to you. Tell you the truth, I was getting a bit worried whether I'd be able to sort this one out.
Like I said, you can't change everything overnight, but some solutions are really quite simple. Remember what I was saying to you about risk stacking? All too often people get hung up on big issues because the small things seem inconsequential, but when taken together they can be substantial and make a dramatic effect on the risk stack.
I can see that now.
Okay, let's recap over the 7 things you're aiming to achieve with your people.
Right. Eliminate manual handling wherever possible by replanning the task or by using trolleys or other manual handling aids. I didn't tell you this, but Andy actually suggested making some changes a while ago. I just didn't think it was that important.
There's no need to beat yourself up over it. When the pressure's on, it's easy to push things to one side. The important thing is that you're aware of them now and you feel you can do something about them.
Yeah, you're right. Make sure all staff work within their capacity and understand that it's not acceptable to have the attitude, I should get help but. Use BELT to check and reduce risks.
Important one, that.
Eliminate stooping and twisting, especially where they're both happening at the same time. Minimise handling that occurs with arms outstretched or where the load isn't held against the body.
Think BELT again. Load close to the body at belt level.
Ensure everyone has the right manual handling skills for their job.
The key for that is to keep the strong S-shaped back.
And set up an agreed system for reporting manual handling risks that staff can't control and for communicating practical suggestions for doing their work.
Good. Now, let's see where that gets you. I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised.
So, now you're expecting the happy ending, right? Everything at Entech going swimmingly. Andy's problem cured, his home life back to normal. Well, it wasn't quite such plain sailing. The initial enthusiasm yielded some pretty amazing results. People found that just because they'd done something the same way for as long as anyone could remember, it didn't mean there wasn't a better way to do it. The old argument that new methods would slow things down proved largely unfounded. Sure, it took people time to get used to a different way of handling and moving things, but the experts were right. By reducing their risk stack, people obviously weren't getting fatigued, and overall efficiency actually improved. It's been a bit difficult to keep the new regime on track, and there have been times when people have slipped back into old ways. Only human nature, I suppose. Even so, Helen's stuck with it, and 6 months down the line, things have definitely changed. It's not all good news, mind you. A couple of suggestions which need capital investment look like they might have to wait a while, and Andy's still not back to his old self. He's been receiving physio, and this, coupled with the changes in his work pattern, has improved things no end. But the medics think he may have caused some permanent damage, so he's going to have to be a bit careful in the future. It doesn't matter whether you work in manufacturing, in a school, a hospital, an office, anywhere for that matter. The problems that the people at Entech encountered stemmed from a lack of awareness of how back problems occur, and more importantly, how to prevent them. By applying the approaches outlined in this programme, you can prevent similar situations in your life. See you.